So, and we're going to record it again. Why not?
Okay.
All right. So let me share my screen, ignoring all the weird articles that pop up on my Firefox that I never actually click on. So let's talk about the AWS certifications. All right. So let's say that you're at the certification site, because it's just a good place to start. And
this is on the AWS certificate, right off of training.aws.
yeah, if you just type in AWS certifications in Google, that's usually what I do.
Okay, gotcha.
And then usually you'll see an Amazon address. Don't let a Cloud
Yep.
Guru or somebody else trick you. You just click in here. And then you can actually just schedule an exam right here. Just click on it.
Gotcha.
Now, the first thing it's going to do, it's going to ask you to sign in the same sign in that you used for AWS.training. So if you've been watching the Cloud Practitioner module, you already have a login to this. So when you click sign in, obviously you're going to choose the one on the left because none of us are partners, right? So we're going to choose the one that says, hey, I'm going to use an Amazon account. And then you're going to sign in. And then, you know, for me, I have a separate account just because why not? And then I'm going to sign in. And what will happen is that it's going to say, hey, you're going to be redirected to another site. This site's called CertMetrics. And you just click go to your account. And then it will immediately take you to the certmetrics.com site /Amazon. Now from here, what will happen is you just say schedule a new exam. And then it's going to like let you know, hey, you've got two, testing providers, right? Typically the provider that we use, as you scroll down, it will show you all the eligible exams. So a lot of this is predicated on you scrolling down. Just be prepared for that. If you don't see the options you're looking for, you probably need to scroll down. And so here, for example, Pearson VUE is usually the preferred provider. PSI actually didn't have online until just recently, but sorry, I'm just taking a look. If you click on the Pearson VUE exam at the Cloud Practitioner line, which is what I just did, it's actually going to then log you into the Pearson VUE system. So we're definitely in inception mode at this point because we logged into AWS, then we logged into CertMetrics, and then we logged into Pearson VUE. So we're 3 dreams in at this point. Now, what from here, none of us have a private access code. So you're either going to go take it at a testing center, of which there are actually some in Madison, Wisconsin, I think it was. Is that right? And then of course you can do it online, which is probably the preferred method, especially with the Delta and potentially now Lambda variants now spiking. So again, the testing centers are totally safe, but yeah. If you want that extra security, take it from home. If not, the testing centers are perfectly safe. They're super sanitized. You keep your mask on. Everything's wiped down. I've actually been recently to one here in Atlanta. So if you take it online, just one thing to check is immediately please run the system test, because you're going to do this preferably on your work computer. So please run the system test just in case. Everything has been attended to. But in case something got missed, you just want to check it now instead of checking it like the day of the exam, because that could be problematic. Now, one thing to note is that when you sign up online, you need to have a very clean testing space. What does that mean? Well, if we click on this just to take a look at it, what this means is that, you probably want to just take a moment to kind of like go through this whole piece, but let me sum it up for you to make it really easy. Your testing space can't have anything on it other than a keyboard, a mouse, one monitor, and or a laptop with all those things. You can't have a second monitor. You can't have a piece of paper. You can't have speakers on your thing. You, in general, just want to clear your desk out. So usually what I do is I actually grab my laptop and I just literally walk right into the dining room. Why? Because the other thing that's going to be a little cumbersome is that you have to take pictures of all 4 sides of your desk. So if you have a desk against the wall, that's not going to work. I recommend you go to another place where you can pull the table out from the wall, take pictures of all 4 sides. My dining room table happens to be clear, so I didn't have to take a picture of underneath it, but they're going to ask you to take a picture of underneath it as well. So just be prepared, is that they're very rigorous about this because they're trying to proctor, in a variety of different environments.
I don't know how you proctor remote but okay, gotcha.
Yeah. And so I do note that you won't be able to wear a watch or have any electronics, although you will keep your phone near you until the proctor, shows up and says, get rid of all your electronics. Do note that, since you won't have any paper or anything, there's other things like you can't talk to yourself. Don't do that. Don't say the questions out loud. Don't go like this. If you do that, they'll politely and gently ask you to take your hands off your mouth. They'll give you like 3 warnings or whatever. And also don't let anybody walk in or don't have a dog running around. They do acoustically fingerprint your room. And if something changes the acoustic fingerprint of the room, they will say something. Hey, has something changed in your environment? Do you have a dog in the environment? Did someone walk in? And they're typically nice about it, but they're also very firm. So something to be aware of. You can use your phone or your video camera to take the pictures of the space. So if you like have your laptop and you just want to go take pictures of the space, you can do that. Typically they'll send you a quick link, a text link to your phone, and you just follow the text link and it'll take pictures for you. It's actually really easy to do. When you sign up for the online version, make sure you show up 20 minutes early. Not a joke. You really do actually need to be there 20 minutes early. So if your appointment's at 1, show up at 12:40, run through the process. Don't worry. As you get better at it, you can shave that time off, but the first time you do it, you need to show up early just to accommodate all the unknowns and gotchas. Your stress level will be greatly reduced, and it'll be easy for you to be ready for that 1 o'clock delivery if that's your time. You will need photo IDs, right? So, one thing to note is that you will need to have at least a driver's license and or a military ID or, a passport. So they'll require that. And usually just take a picture of it and submit it. They will do facial recognition against your photo, against you. So just know that when you say yes to this, they will actually do facial reconciliation. It says 30 minutes before your appointment time. You could go 30 minutes, but 20 is actually usually good enough. They're not going to check to see if you're there. That's just to give you time to walk through the process. Okay, so let's say we choose online and we click next. So we've secured our space. We know everything. They're going to basically ask you to acknowledge a bunch of policies, including data processing, facial recognition, third-party prohibition, limited license. Oh, there's the facial comparison policy. And then other things around, you need to show that, a government ID, right? Examples of, acceptable identification, and a couple other things, most of which are not relevant unless you decide to change something. And that's when you're going to have to really take a look at it. Make sure you read this. Reschedule policy, by the way, is that you can actually reschedule twice from the original appointment. After that, you have to cancel. And they'll give you your money back. They want you to start the process over. Okay. You have 24 hours, by the way, before your exam to change or cancel. Otherwise, you're locked into taking it. They won't give you your money back after that. Let's see. Make sure you read by like this. All personal items need to be out of reach. You're not going to be able to stand up or leave your workstation for any reason, including restroom or any other kind of break. There's no notes, no mumbling or speaking. Food, beverage may not be accessed in any way, shape, or form. This isn't really a problem for a 90-minute exam. I got to say, after 3 hours, I was pretty thirsty for the professional and specialty exams. Okay, once you say agree to all that, they're going to say, hey, what's your preferred language? Which, Nihongo dekimasu ka? Hablas español? Whichever language you're interested in. And then obviously I chose English in this case. The exam's $100. Vouchers have been provided. I'll show you where to put the vouchers in, right? And you just confirm that this is what you're doing, is that you're taking an online exam. You click next. And then it's going to ask you for the language that you want the proctor to use. Oddly enough, AWS is really popular in Japan, which is why that's the other language. I thought China would have it as well, but they don't. So please pay attention to this section because they do deliver exams 24 hours a day. So, I have had people accidentally sign up for 1 o'clock in the morning, which obviously didn't work, but you can kind of choose from here. So for example, this is the week of the 9th. So, there's actually slots available on Thursday. Most people like myself prefer to take it on a weekend just because there's less stress and tension. But let's say we do choose Saturday the 14th. They'll ask you whether you want it military time or whatnot. I usually do military time just because it's real easy to not make a mistake with times with military time. So that's 7 o'clock at night, which honestly I'd be half asleep, so that wouldn't be a great time. But let's say I chose that. They will ask you questions like, is this your right time zone and whatnot? So right. So notice it says EDT here. So they will check. Here's the $100. That's just going to confirm that you've signed up for what you said you wanted to sign up for and that the exam number matches. You say proceed to checkout. This is where, by the way, you enter the voucher promo code right here. This is it. Add payment. So then that's it. And then If you want to select a card, you can. Obviously, they're going to check on your billing information and whatnot. I can't remember. I don't think you need to submit a card if the voucher is input. Christine, Chris, when you signed up, did you use the voucher? I didn't mean to put her on the spot.
I did not use a voucher.
No.
I had it set up before this.
Okay. I don't remember I think if you put the voucher in there, I don't think it asks you for your billing information, but if it does, it might still ask for it. But I can't remember actually. And then of course, it wants a valid type. So I'm not going to go forward for you because I'm not going to sign up, but that's it. You click next. What will happen is that you're going to get a series of emails, an email validating that you signed up and that you're set for a certain date. And it's going to basically resend you all the stuff that you should do the day before, like before the exam. About a few days before the exam, you're also going to get an email that says, hi, you have an exam in a couple of days. Here's some things that you should check on just to make sure everything's cool. And then the day of the exam, you're going to get an email basically saying, hi, you have an exam today. Good luck, right? Here's some things you should probably do before you get to the exam. And that's it. And then you show up, and what will happen is that there'll be a link for you to take the class inside the emails that you get. And you just follow the link's instructions. They will literally walk you step by step through taking a picture of your passport and your driver's license. They'll walk you step by step through taking the pictures. They'll send a link to your phone. It is super intuitive and will literally just walk you through the whole thing. They've really got it down. Now, when you download the software, it will take over, in a sense, your computer just in terms of taking over the screen. And you want to have nothing else running in the background. Just close everything if you can, except for like maybe a browser. And even that you'll close eventually. But once you go full screen in the exam, you won't be able to alt tab or do anything else out of the screen. It's locked to the exam portfolio at that point. It's pretty intuitive from there. Again, remember, they say 30 minutes. I think 20 is fine. Show up at least, like be in seat 20 minutes, got your stuff all ready and settled to walk through the process, because that's going to be important to make sure that you make it to your exam on time. You might actually wait a few minutes for a proctor to come online. I have actually waited up to 20 minutes after my exam time for a proctor to come online. Kind of frustrating. They were super busy. I guess they had some people down, and it was a 3-hour exam. So, well, ostensibly. So just note that if it happens, just be patient. It has happened once or twice out of like dozens of exams where, they were late, and they're not trying to be late. They just are overloaded trying to coordinate with people. Okay. Questions? Concerns?
No, that was good. Thanks.
Okay. Good. Okay. So before we move to the same thing that we've been doing for quite some time now, which is exam questions, just to build confidence, does anyone have any specific questions or asks that they've run into in general? Because ostensibly, we're all working on practice exams. The modules for Cloud Practitioner have all been finished, and we're either working through to get to those 90, 95 percentile on the practice exams, or we've signed up for the exam because we're going to take it. So does anybody have any questions for me or anything related to anything about the exam, the modules, anything whatsoever? No? Okay. Let's see here. Let's get back to Cloud Practitioner. Here we are. Okay. Well, then let's run through some more questions. By the way, I hope people are getting benefit out of this, just kind of the analysis and the refreshment and reinforcement. Just know that if at any point in time you need to drop to do something else, I'm not going to be offended, but I'm glad that you're here and participating.
Yeah.
So
well, yeah, Michael, don't be offended, but I've got 9 other things I've got to get done before the end of the day. Thank you very much for this. This has been great.
Good. Thanks, Greg. All right. Let's see here. Got that. Okay. All right. So let's do another review mode exam. This time, let's do set 4. Okay. All right. I don't even think we've touched this one yet. We don't have any questions. Okay. So again, standard fare. I got chat open 1, 2, 3, or 4 for the answers. So let's do it. Customers use an S3 based service to store sprites of game characters. Sprites, that's a word you don't hear a whole lot. Basically, that means pictures, I think. When players retrieve these sprites, they are temporarily stored on the player's computer. If the S3 bucket is using a standard storage class, how can you further optimize costs? This is an interesting question. This one's actually not super clear, to be frank. It says, have the customer directly upload the sprites to S3 standard and frequent access, which would produce them on accessible but less frequently accessed storage. Have the customer compress the sprites to reduce storage consumption. That's not necessarily a bad thing. Add a lifecycle policy to move sprites to S3 standard and frequent access after the customer uploads them. That's also valid. Add a lifecycle policy to move sprites to Glacier after the customer uploads them. That's probably not valid, honestly. So I'm sitting here thinking that probably it's going to be infrequent access. And why start with standard when you could just go straight to infrequent access? So if I were to guess, I would probably say it's going to be either 1 or 3. And I'm thinking that, like, why wouldn't we just start with infrequent access, right? And so I see that a couple of you agree. So let's see if our guess is correct, right? And it is actually. And I think it's worth noting is that we did guess about this, right? Because the way the question was worded, it wasn't actually clear what the best possible outcome was, but that is the cheapest way to do it. Although I gotta tell you, I've compressed files before and saved tens of thousands of dollars per month, particularly for CloudFront charges, not necessarily for S3, but this is about S3. So in this case, since sprites are rarely accessed, that was the key word there. We knew infrequent access was the deal, right? And we had a copy on the user's phone, so it's not like they didn't have a local copy they could access. So they would really actually only come back to grab the sprite in the event that they somehow lost the copy of the sprite on their phone, which seems unlikely. So it seems like infrequent access is the best storage type to use, right? So there we go. Let's see. I think this answer to the question is like, obviously storing directly to IA is probably better because you will incur some cost if you put it on S3 standard and then move it over to IA. So that makes sense. Yeah. Okay. The moral of the story there is that what's the cheapest from an AWS service perspective based on rarely accessed, infrequent access is the key. Okay. What does AWS do when a storage device reaches the end of its lifespan? Security in question, right? Different cloud concepts. So do they follow a strict decommissioning process? Do they wipe the drive and send it back to the manufacturer? Do they simply wipe the device and dispose it? Or do they archive the device in case the customer asks for data again? You know, considering how security conscious AWS is, I would assume that it's actually going to be 1, right? Because they're going to follow all the compliance procedures. And I think actually I've seen dust from them grinding hard drives actually. So it seems like some of you agree. Let's check it out. Yeah, 1. They're not just going to throw them away. They're going to follow compliance procedures for this. Makes sense. Okay. Next, a MariaDB RDS database is known to have high memory consumption during peak hours, which deteriorates the overall performance of your app. What cost-effective change can you introduce to resolve the issue if the database is handling write-intensive operations? So this one's interesting, is that it deteriorates the performance of the applications, and we assume that there's reads and there's writes going on, right? But the application is suffering, especially if the database is handling write-intensive operations. So is there a way to protect and somehow offload or get more performance out of an instance? That seems like there's several ways actually. So especially if memory consumption during peak hours is actually pretty high, there's a couple of ways to do that. Adding read replicas seems like to lessen the burden of read operations. That could help, although it is memory pressure. Wouldn't necessarily help write operations per se, but it could because it could offload something. And then scaling the instance to a vertical, like high memory capacity, that seems pretty rock solid. Distribute the workload, that's not really possible unless you're going to shard, which requires a bunch of like changes. And then switching to DynamoDB is not going to be the answer, right? I got to tell you, I would try read replicas first just to see if that made a difference. But I suspect that you would end up landing on a vertical rescaling, which I see that, people have posted various things. So I'm going to take a guess and say high memory capacity, but just know that it could also probably be one. But in this case, it is memory pressure. So they're asking you to basically upsize the instance, right? Now, if it said that it was handling read intensive operations, then read might make a lot of sense. But in this case, they're saying write intensive. And so the only way to handle that is actually to make the box bigger. So if it says read intensive operations, then you can go for read replicas. So here's some explanations about horizontal versus vertical scaling. So read operations, by the way, although it can lessen the load on your source by routing read queries, the database was explicitly being overloaded by write intensives. And that's the thing that we need to deal with. And then vertical scaling is the only way to do that. Okay. Which compliance requirement has AWS achieved that allows the handling of medical information? I'm not even in the medical area, but we're probably all pretty familiar with this. I don't even know what the others address from a specifically medical situation. I know what PCI DSS attends to, but in this case, it's going to be HIPAA because that's literally the thing, right? Around medical, right? So, okay. I see that some of you agreed there. All right, which of the following controls does the customer fully inherit from AWS based on the shared responsibility model? So what do they inherit from AWS? Like which ones does AWS handle? Oh, sorry. Which ones does the customer fully inherit? So which one is the customer responsible for, right? All right, let's see. Looking at the timestamps, see that someone posted 4. Let's see. This question is actually a little confusing. So I would think when they say which does the customer fully inherit, would they be like, what are you responsible for? So the question's a little badly worded. So what they're actually saying is, what is it that AWS actually has covered for you, right? So awareness and training, they don't have covered for you. That's a company responsibility. Configuration management of the operating systems, that's definitely going to be on the customer. Patch management for an operating system is definitely going to be on the customer, because assuming you have access to the operating system. But physical environmental controls, you will never have responsibility for because you don't have access to the data center. But the question was worded weirdly, so we're going to kind of write that one off as a wash. So, okay. So auto scaling is based on demand. I'm sorry, based on demand is an implementation of which AWS best cloud practice? What does auto scaling allow you to do with EC2 instances? Design for perfection. That's one of my favorites because that's like the lowest standard because it doesn't really exist, right? So I see that a bunch of you put 3, implementing elasticity. That's accurate. So there are various best practices as part of the well-architected framework that you can read about, but definitely designing for failure, decoupling, like being loosely coupled, implementing elasticity, think parallel, right, instead of in series. Auto scaling definitely implements elasticity, and it's kind of the secret sauce that makes virtual machines cheaper on AWS if you actually do use elasticity. All right. Which payment plan will give you the largest discount when purchasing EC2 reserve instances? So when you look at this, I want you to think, if I give AWS more money now, they will give you more of a discount later. That's how you get the largest discount. obviously for a longer period of time. So with that being said, an all upfront payment means more money in Amazon's hands now. A longer term means a longer term commitment. And so they're willing to give you more of a discount if you basically go for more money upfront and a longer term engagement with AWS. Good. Okay, thank you for your postings, by the way. That's good. All right, which of the following instances is it better to use IAM roles than IAM users? Okay, so considering that there's two options here, what we're looking for is when would you use roles over users? Where would it be better to use roles instead of users? So which two of these would be better for roles? Okay, so I see 4 and 2. To employees who will constantly need access to resources, and if you need to an administrator to handle the account for you. Okay. Now, let me draw this distinction and see if anybody wants to change their answers. Roles are for temporary permissions, right? So not permanent permissions. Users are for permanent permissions. Roles are also awesome when you want to give something other than a user permissions. Users are obviously awesome for users, or if you want to give something that, you know, is not necessarily on AWS permissions. But roles are for temporary permissions and users are for permanent permissions. So which one then makes sense based on what I just said? So let's see, services basically, and then outside entities that you want to perform an action. Yeah. So roles are great for temporary permissions. So that's perfect, right? And services are not really users. So giving them roles makes more sense because you don't want them to have user like level management. You just want to give them a set of permissions because the services aren't going anywhere. You know what they are, right? Employees are permanent. GUI is permanent, right? So you need a user to access the GUI, really. And then administrator handle the account, that administrator is going to be a permanent user. So that's a user access code. So remember, roles are for granting temporary credentials. So roles to delegate. Okay. Which of the following services should you provision if your local data center requires additional storage space and you don't want to migrate data? So I give you a hint. Which of these services can act as a living proxy for AWS storage services in your data center? Because that's what they're saying, basically. Good. I see 3 listed there. Let's check it. Yeah, storage gateway. This is literally a virtual machine that runs inside your data center on VMware or whatever that basically acts as a proxy for S3 and Glacier back to your data center. It acts as a file, a tape, or a disk, like a volume gateway. So it's actually pretty cool. And it's been around for a long time, like 10 years or something ridiculous. It's pretty solid service at this point. Okay, you're in need of a database that is capable of self-healing and has high throughput. Which of these following services fits the criteria? So basically, when they say self-healing, what they're actually saying is basically like there's no management on your part required to run the service. It's basically more of a SaaS than a PaaS. Which of these is a high level service that doesn't, for example, create nodes or doesn't require EC2 instances or any of that? It's just literally just a service. You create tables and go. No? So Aurora does have a serverless version, but that's not what they're talking about. This test is relatively old, and so they're thinking that this is still using EC2 instances. Redshift requires you to start nodes, right, to make a cluster. RDS requires you to start EC2 style instances, right, to run your database. So DynamoDB is the only one that could qualify for this, right? Except Aurora does actually have a serverless version. So now I would have gotten this one wrong, right? But let's see why. Self-healing, huh? That's actually not true. But I would have gotten this one wrong. Fault tolerant self-healing storage system that scales up to it's actually not. So, all right, fair enough. So I guess Aurora is a possibility. DynamoDB though, when it loses data, because since it's copied 3 times, will automatically restore it. You'll never know that you lost anything. Aurora will deal with fault tolerance, but there's usually a hiccup or a blip. So, okay, I would have gotten that one wrong. So I guess when you come back to this, is that I would say, like, if they talk about self-healing, apparently from their perspective, Aurora is the better choice than DynamoDB. So when taking the test, if it says self-healing database with high throughput, then Aurora is going to be the one that Amazon wants you to choose, not DynamoDB. Good to know. Okay. Tracy, self-healing means that if one of the nodes goes down, it recovers for you automatically. Now, DynamoDB does do that, but in this particular case, they're explicitly calling out that if you have 6 nodes in an Aurora database and one of them fails, it will automatically recover the system. So, which you don't ever see that actually with DynamoDB. It's just, it happens invisibly. Yeah. So availability zones are physically separated by a meaningful distance from any other AZ, although all are within 100 kilometers or 60 miles of each other. What is the primary reason why availability zones are set up the way they are now, right? Yeah, I gotta tell you that I would guess that it's probably 1. But just to say this, one thing that's kind of tickling in the back of my mind is that Amazon doesn't consider availability zones to be disaster recovery like tolerant, right? So I have a feeling that this is a trick question and that probably they're going to say something like C, but let's see. Because I would also just go ahead and put 1. And that is the answer. But just so you know, like, typically most people don't consider that distance meaningful enough to survive a disaster. So it doesn't typically meet DR requirements, right? I know it's 60 miles, right? But meteor hits, nuclear, whatever, that doesn't always fit coverage. So most people need multi-region to support company standards for disaster recovery. But in that case, we would have gotten it right because it's the only real answer that kind of makes sense. All right. Which of the following purchase options offers the most significant discount compared to on-demand instance pricing to process steady state workloads that will continuously be running for a year? Let's really break that down for a second. Steady state workloads that will be continuously running for a year. That's, first of all, spot instances, even if it was on the list, isn't going to work, right? That's not going to make any sense. Dedicated instances are off because that's a more expensive option than on demand. So now what we're really looking at is reserved instances, and what can give us basically the most, like, deepest discount. Now, scheduled reserve instances don't really offer that much of a discount because it's only a fraction of a day or 1 day a month or some variation, and it does say continuously, so we know that's off the table. Convertible reserve instances you usually buy because you think you're going to change the workload, but this actually says it's going to be steady state and running continuously for a year. So that makes me think, that's probably not the right one. So standard reserve instances are going to be the right answer. Notice the discount can be up to 75%. hold on 1 second. Okay. So like I said, that's the one that gives, I think, the most discount. That would be the one where you go for the 1 to 3 year all upfront payment, and that's going to give you that up to 75% that you're looking for. Okay. This is one of those like benefits of the cloud question, right? How has expense shifted when moving from traditional on-premise data centers to, say, AWS or the cloud, right? So from Amazon's perspective, they want you to stop investing in hardware and in data centers and, go to kind of a service-based model. What best represents the type of expenditure or hardware investment is versus the kind of like service model? What phrase do they actually use? This one is a horribly tricky question because they used to say one phrase and now they say the other phrase, and this is what shows up in the official content, right? So the phrase they use now is this one. They used to use this one, but then they didn't like operational, and so now they switched to this one. So that was the old phrase. I almost guarantee that that's now the phrase they want because that's what's in all the content now. So capital expense is traded for variable expense. Good. Which service offers volume discounts when you enable consolidated billing? So here's what this question is actually saying. As you put more and more into the system, like which of these services, as you add more to it, the price per unit drops. The price per unit drops. And the unit, by the way, could be gigabyte, unit could be API calls, unit could be data transfer, it could be messages sent, right? Which is an example of all 4 of these. Good. Seems like there's a consensus here is that S3 is the service that they're talking about, right? It's the one that gives you volume discounts. So take a look at this. 8 terabytes in one account, 4 terabytes in another account. If you do consolidated billing, all of that gets charged under one bill. So what happens is then that 4 and 8 combine to be 12 terabytes of total usage instead of 2 separate bills of 4 and 8 respectively. You get one bill of 12. But here's the cool thing. When you get above a certain level, above 10 terabytes, the price per terabyte drops, right? So instead of paying the full 174 per terabyte, it dropped to 133 per terabyte. Notice that these other ones do not have volume discounts, so they wouldn't have been in the running anyway, right? Okay. Last few. Which of the following is one example of a security best practice in AWS? Good. MFA only on the root account? That sounds concerning. Granting most privilege, isn't it least privilege? Always manually defining permissions to each and every individual user account? Ooh, that sounds sketchy. Create an IAM user with admin privileges instead of using root? Well, that sounds like that's right up our alley, and I think all of you agree, right? You don't use the root user for anything if possible. Nothing. Good. You have an Amazon EC2 and Linux running for 1 hour and 30 minutes. How will AWS bill you in terms of usage? Ooh. So what's interesting about this is that it's an Amazon Linux instance, right? Now, by the way, just so you're aware, this now the answer to this actually applies to almost everything except for Red Hat Enterprise Linux and SUSE. Windows is now, well, I don't want to give that away, but let's just say that the answer to this applies to everything except for Red Hat and SUSE Linux, right? So here, 1 hour and 29 minutes, that doesn't make any sense. You build for 1 hour according to the hourly billing rule. No, you'll be billed for 1 hour and 30 minutes according to the hourly billing rule. No, you'll be billed 1 hour and 30 minutes according to the per second billing rule. That's actually the right answer, right? So Amazon switched to per second billing for Amazon Linux like a couple years ago. Then they added other Linuxes like Ubuntu. Then they added Windows just like, I don't even know, like 3 months ago. So almost everything's on the per second rule except for Mac OS and the licensed Linux instances like RHEL and SUSE. They're still on per hour. And Mac, by the way, if you start a Mac instance, it's instantly 6 hours of charge. So if you start it for 30 seconds and kill it, you charge for 6 hours. That's just the licensing agreement they have with Apple. Just moving on. Okay. What type of EBS volume is recommended for most workloads and is also usable as a boot volume? Oh, good. See some instant answers there. That's perfect. Yeah, the one with the intuitive name that says general purpose. Yeah, that's probably the one. Honestly, it is. By the way, which two of these can be used as boot volumes? Just give me the numbers. 2 is obviously one. What's the other one? What's the other SSD here that can be used as a boot volume? Oh, okay. I soft followed that one up. Come on. Yeah, 4. Remember, the SSDs can be used as boot volumes. The other two cannot. They cannot be used to boot a system. Amazon no longer allows people to use mechanical hard drives to boot operating systems because they're just so slow. So that. What is the lowest support plan that allows an unlimited number of technical support cases to be open? Ooh. This is interesting. Unlimited number of support cases. All right, I see developer listed there. Let's see, right? It is. Well, developer is basically the lowest cost paid plan that you can have. I can't remember what it is, but I think it's like $100 or some percentage, whatever is higher now. Let's go take a look, actually. What's the cost? Oh, so $100. The greater of either $30 a month or 3% of your monthly usage. So if you're spending $100 a month, that's $3. Cool. Okay. If you are tasked to create a lightweight WordPress site in AWS without having to install the package on your own, which platform has a service will allow you to do this easily? Huh. Interesting. Which PaaS solution will allow you to create a lightweight WordPress site in AWS? This is a pure marketing question, by the way. Amazon Lightsail? Really? You're gonna guess for the VPS service that's the one? And you'd be absolutely right, right? Lightsail, by the way, is like, remember, I don't know if like the 90s and 2000s, so where you could just go rent a server, like a virtual private server for yourself. And it wasn't necessarily enterprise class and didn't have to have all the fancy enterprise networking and all the other stuff. You just bought a server and it just went, right? That's what Lightsail really is. It's just a virtual private server where everything's kind of like done and set up for you. Comes with like a control panel, just like any other private hosting service. So it's a throwback to our hosting services basically from the 90s and 2000s. Good. By the way, here it is where you get to choose your stack and you get to like choose like which stuff you're going to install. The Plex, by the way, gives you a full control panel into the system. So in the event of a disaster or an outage, AWS recommends that you spread your servers and databases in at least different what? What at a minimum does it recommend that you run at least 2 of? Good. So even though like 100 kilometers doesn't necessarily meet most people's DR requirements, from a high availability standpoint, it definitely meets it. And if it's a local disaster, it still meets it as well. So Amazon's starting to really change their language around that. They're actually moving some of their data centers even further apart, which is kind of nice, actually. It used to be 25 kilometers and now they're going further. Isn't it interesting that they can just move people's workloads and no one ever really knows? Fascinating. Which of the following does the enterprise support plan provide to customers in AWS? So which of these two items are part of the enterprise support plan? Let's see, I see 2 and 4. So proactive TAM management, access to online self-paced labs. I see 4 and 2 there. All right, I'm gonna go with the crowd in this case, although I'm pretty sure at least one of those may be a challenge. All right, there we go. Okay, so with enterprise support, you get 24/7 technical support, but here you definitely get a TAM, which is like part of it. Credits for online self-paced labs provided through an AWS training partner. So if you sign up for enterprise, you do get it, right? Note that the enterprise level is the only one that has a TAM, and it is the only one that has self-paced labs. 15-minute response time to production. That's actually part of the business as well. Note it, like this one was almost like really tricksy, right? And then limited access to core is not part of it as well either. I might have gotten that one wrong actually, because I don't know that I remember the access to online self-paced labs, but it sounds like some of you did. All right, where can the customer view his reserved instance usage for the past month? Where would you go to see your RI usage for the past month? It seems like it might be a trick question. I see a couple of you answered, right? But it's really not. Just the billing console. That's all it is. You can go into EC2 in order to purchase reserve instances. I don't even know if they have reports in there, but the billing console is definitely where you can see how much of those reserve instances were used. Okay. All right. Last two. Which AWS storage service offers faster disk read and write performance and provides temporary block level storage for your instance? In other words, which of these offers temporary storage, not permanent storage? That's really the question. So EBS and EFS are definitely persistent permanent storage, but instant storage is the culprit because it provides super fast storage, but it's ephemeral. If that instance crashes, that data is gone. But I think you can get 185,000 IO, random IO per second out of a instant store because it's NVMe RAM. So it's like ridiculously fast. In general, don't use instant storage unless you're just using it for scratch. Don't, or temporary directory. Don't use it to store permanent data. Okay, last question. Customer wants to further secure the network beyond security groups and network access control list. Which of the services below can add additional security features to your network? Select 2. Which of these can help protect your applications and network? Good, I saw 1 and 3. I think that's great, actually. So WAF is a web application firewall. So that's a layer 7 firewall. And then guard duty basically monitors your network inside AWS for any malicious activity. So good choices. Good. All right. So we got our last 3 minutes together. Of course, unless you decide to come on Wednesday, and I'll see you there. But does anyone have any questions or anything else I can help with? Any guidance, any motivation I can provide, any support around, finishing your cloud practitioner exam?
Yeah, I have just a quick question. How long will we have access to the Tutorials Dojo content after this course officially ends?
Indefinitely. It's yours.
Okay, perfect.
Not only that, John updates it like at least every 6 months to a quarter. So if you decide to re-up in a year or two, it'll still be there.
Perfect.
Yeah, and he's really good about that. So, which is why we also like using him. I have Udemy courses that I bought in 2019 from him, and he still updates them. He still keeps them up to date. Shocking. So, yeah. Okay. Well, if no one has any further questions, then I will tell you that it's been a pleasure to hang out with you for these last few weeks. And if any of you need anything, please post into Basecamp. Just let me know if you run into any problems or questions. One thing I would ask is that when you pass, please like post and let us know. And yeah, other than that, just stay in touch. And at some point in time, we'll probably like reboot or re-engage. We'll just like see what happens from here. But hopefully I'll see you in other classes at NGL. Okay. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah.